First Sunday of this new year, and I pray the Lord's blessing on you and all of us and our congregation as well as we journey throughout this year with a year that we don't know exactly what is going to hold for us. And this is where the book of Ruth comes in, Ruth the expat. And so in the next four Sundays, there are 4 chapters, and we're going to work our way through the book of Ruth until the end of January. And today we're going to look at Ruth chapter 1. We're actually going to read the whole chapter in just a moment. And I believe it's important that we read the whole of Ruth over the next month as we journey through this book and this story. Today we're going to look at how Ruth and Naomi journeyed from, Naomi journeyed from pleasant to bitter. And we'll be looking at that a little bit. The book is about expats. I don't know if you've been familiar with the word expat, but Ruth is a story of expats. Naomi and her family, husband and 2 sons, became expats traveling to Moab. And then Ruth became an expat as she traveled back with Naomi to settle back in Judea. The word expat is short for expatriate, and it comes from the Latin ex, which means out of, and patria, which means fatherland or the land of your fathers. And so people who live in another country, not the country of their birth or upbringing, are referred to as expats. Expats can include refugees, of which we have thousands and even millions. People seeking a better future elsewhere, some who flee their country or just simply leave their country in pursuit of a better life elsewhere. Some people marry across cultural boundaries and even country boundaries, and so they move to wherever a spouse has maybe a better settlement. So they move for marriage's sake and also for studies, going to study overseas or abroad. And then in other cases, simply for adventure, just going to live in another country for a little while as part of an adventure. According to the International Organization of Migration, for short IOM, in 2020, there were about 280 million people around the world living not in their home country, their country of birth. That number has increased with more refugees and more people traveling and so on. And so by last year, some estimates are over 300 million people live in a country not their own. That would make, if you lump them all together, it would literally make the 4th largest people group in the world after China and India, both of them with about 1.4 billion people. And then America, the USA with about 340 million. Indonesia is sitting just under 300 million, so round about the same population as Indonesia. People would live around the world in different countries. We have our fair share of them right here, probably in our congregation also. We have some expats who live in South Africa or stay here for a while, other than their birth country. So the book of Ruth is an expat story. The Bible itself contains plenty of stories about expats. Abraham, to remind you, became an expat as he traveled from Ur and the Chaldeans up north. He lived up north on that crescent for a while until God called him and he went to Canaan. And in Canaan, he lived as an expat. He himself traveled to Egypt at some stage, living there for a little while. And then Joseph, the son of Jacob, became an expat by force when he lived and eventually became a king or a ruler in Egypt. And so we have plenty of those kind of people. And just recently, as we looked at the story of Jesus and the birth of Jesus, soon after his birth, Joseph, his father, was told in a dream to take him to Egypt. So Jesus himself became an expat for a while when he, as a baby, went to Egypt with his parents. So it's not an unknown phenomenon, even in the Bible. And since then, we have plenty of those, and bringing us to where we are today with all those millions of people who are living in countries not their birth. So as we begin our journey through the book of Ruth, it's named after the main character. Today we're going to focus on Naomi particularly, but the story really is about Ruth. And it ends ultimately with David, but let's not go there yet. We'll get there in another few weeks from now. But I believe we need to read the story. It's a bit long, but I think it's necessary that we sketch the background and the setting for what I believe the Lord is wanting to say to us today. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, so a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons, Mahlon and Kilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one called Orpah, and the other one Ruth. After they had lived there for about 10 years, both Mahlon and Kilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud and said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have more sons? Who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband, and even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." At this they wept aloud. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. So the 2 women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, and the woman exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. It's a story of crisis and hope as we go through the whole book of Ruth. And it seems like here in chapter 1, it's just more crisis than hope at all. There's almost no hope here. Most of us are probably familiar with the expression, "Every dark cloud has a silver lining." And sometimes we say it glibly, especially to people going through a crisis or a problem. And without really understanding how they are feeling, we may say to them, "Just hold on, it will get better soon." And actually, it's a bit glibly to say that because we don't really know what people are going through. And to say to Naomi, "Naomi, it's not that bad, there's a silver lining somewhere." And there was, but Naomi was not at the time able to really see it and to experience it. And so it is a story of dark clouds and silver linings. Chapter 1 is actually more dark than silver, if you really come to think of it. And that's the way Naomi experienced that. It's a story showing the realities of life, the realities of going through difficulties, trials, drought, in their particular case, having to move away to seek better fortunes, and then death. Not just one, but 3 of her male people, her 2 sons and her husband, died while they were in Moab. It's a sad story. It's a sad story for Naomi. And she faced life's crises like probably a few other people can do. But it is a story where it moves from crisis and devastation and dark cloud to hope. And that's how we need to read the story of Ruth as you go through it. And there are signs of the silver lining right here in chapter 1 already. But Naomi was probably not able at the time to even see it. And just as we may go through crises or a crisis in our lives, at that particular moment, it's very difficult to see any light at the end of a tunnel. We're right in this dark tunnel. There's a dark cloud, and we're not able really to see where the light will come from in the future. And this is precisely this kind of hope-deprived situation that we have in Ruth chapter 1, but also in that very same crisis situation, in this hope-deprived chapter, we can find hope, we can find encouragement. And this is really what I want us to look for as we go through the story again and look for how dark it became for Naomi, but at the same time where the light started to shine and where Naomi should have seen it, although she's not really seeing it, yet not in chapter 1. I believe Ruth is a story that teaches us to find God in the midst of disaster. As we move from the title of the message, from pleasant to bitter, as we move from bitterness to pleasantness. And so that's a journey that all of us somehow need to go through. Sometimes the journey is towards bitterness, but I believe it needs to be turned around. And if we are patient and wait for the Lord and seek the Lord's face, the coin will turn the other side, and there will be a movement from bitterness towards pleasantness. And so I want to look at the bitterness that Naomi experienced in this chapter. Ruth chapter 1 has many, many reasons why Naomi would have felt like the Lord has really abandoned her, something she said to the women when she arrived back in Bethlehem. There's a whole list of them. And so let me remind you that the book opens with the wording in when the judges ruled in verse 1. It was a time of leadership vacuum. Not long ago, Kobus preached through some highlights of the book of Judges. It is a very, very, very sad book. I always say to people, when you come towards the end of this, you really need to have an 18-plus age restriction for the horrible things that are happening in Judges. It's a time when people fell into sin again and again. It's a time when God punished them again and again. It's a time where God saved them again and again, only for them to turn around and sin again, and so it goes on, cycle after cycle after cycle. So during this time, it was a dark time in the life of Israel, in the history of Israel. This particular time probably happened somewhere between 1200 and 1000 BC. So those 200 years or so after the Israelites under Joshua moved into the land of Canaan and they started settling, we have that period called the Judges. Judges meaning leaders or rulers of Israel, and God selected certain people and used them to bring salvation to Israel. It's the time before the kings, and so this is the time of Ruth. King David came probably ruled from about 1,000 when he was appointed, Saul before him, but then David about 1,000 BC, and he ruled for about 40 years until the year 960 or so. And so if you move back in history, Ruth, you need to place right in that time of difficulty, trouble, leaderlessness, vacuum, emptiness, and sin, and struggle to settle in the land. It's a story of famine, which is very well known for people who live close to the earth, the soil, and most of the people were busy in agriculture at the time. They had farmland, and so cities were not great and enormous as they are right now. And so people were closer to the earth and closer to weather patterns and dependent on the weather for bringing a harvest. And when there is a famine, when there is a drought, and it goes on for year after year after year, and eventually some farmers have to pack up. And it's a story that most farmers will know much about. And so this is exactly what happened to Elimelech. He had a piece of land where he farmed, and the drought led to a famine, and the family was forced to move to Moab. The darkness continued because here they are actually settling as expats in the land of Moab. Moab originated with Lot, the nephew of Abraham. There's a very, very sad story back in the book of Genesis where Lot and Abraham separated, and Lot settled in Sodom and Gomorrah. And when God destroyed them, he led Lot out, and they lived in the mountains. And Lot's two daughters actually decided on a devious plan, and that is to allow their father to make children with them. One of those was actually called, one of the grandchildren of Lot was called Moab. And he is the originator of the nation of Moab. So when the Israelites moved out of Egypt, they had to go through the land of Moab in order to get to the land of Canaan. And the Moabites wouldn't allow them, and they became enemies. But it seems like if you read through Scripture, it was a bit of a fluid kind of situation. Here we have Elimelech and Naomi with their children going to settle in the land of Moab, and they're not killed. There is no phobia here, apparently. So they were able to settle to the point where they lived there for at least 10 years, says the Bible. And so it's a bit of a fluid situation. But at the same time, Moab or Moabites did not serve the God of Israel. They served a God called Chemos. And so when Naomi said, go back to your mother's home and to your gods, that's probably one of the things she's referring to. Go back. I mean, this is your culture. That's your language. This is your home. You can go back there. So leaving for Moab would have been a kind of a dark cloud for them. And at the same time, the death of Elimelech and then her two sons after that, we're not told exactly how long that lasted, but it seems like from the story it lasted after the death of Elimelech. They remained there, and ultimately the sons found Moabite women or wives. That in itself would be like a shattered dream for Naomi, because the Bible very clearly said you must find yourself Israelite women and not marry with the foreigners around, because they will mislead you, they will lead you into wrong worship and sin and so forth. And so they should have remained pure, as it were. So for Naomi, it was a shattered dream, the fact that that her sons actually married Moabite women, and she's not back in Israel where they could select some Israelite women, which is a very typical second-generation thing. When expats or people move to another country and they have children in the other country, those children eventually become almost nationalized, and they would look for their partners in that particular culture. So it's a natural thing, but also a devastation to Naomi. And that leads to lost hope. Lost hope that her sons would ever find an Israelite wife. That is now gone because they're already married to Moabite wives. But then on top of that, both of them died without having children. And so the likelihood of Naomi becoming a grandmother, the likelihood of having a son who could then inherit the property back in Judah and Bethlehem, that is gone. It's just a devastating reality and a truth for Naomi. So it gets darker and darker the further you go into this particular story. And that leads to simply a lost hope and no future. When Naomi finally decided to return to her homeland, she is basically willing to go it alone. She's basically saying to Orpah and Ruth, go home. The Lord is against me. And she arrives in Bethlehem. The Lord is against me. He has left me. I'm just here. I'm just going to die. I don't know what's going to happen to me. I want to die in obscurity. I don't know what will happen to the property because there's no one to inherit the property here. And it's just a lost case. I mean, in total, it's just dark, very, very dark. And therefore, it's no wonder when Naomi is kind of surprisingly welcomed back in Bethlehem. You know, this is 10 years later or even longer. But the women recognize Naomi. Is this Naomi? I mean, she still has property in that area. Is this Naomi? And Naomi's name means pleasant, pleasantness. And Naomi says, don't even call me pleasant. Call me Mara. Call me bitter. I'm bitter. The Lord made me bitter. The Lord took everything away from me. And I have nothing. So just call me bitter. And so it led, the whole story, the dark picture, led to a bitterness that you kind of think to yourself, can you really blame Naomi? She has lost virtually everything in life that could give her hope and a future and joy. She no longer has a husband. Her children died. Her sons died. One daughter-in-law is left, and they are Moabites anyway. And so I just have nothing. I have no future. Naomi needed to know, however, that somewhere in all of this was God. She doesn't know it yet. She will eventually. And so that's the hope in the story. So there's light at the end of the tunnel. But the light at the moment shines very, very, very dimly. So dimly that Naomi is not able to see it. She ends this chapter on a bitter note, knowing that there is just nothing left for me in this world. But the truth is that God is somehow in control of everything. And we'll see that as we go through the story of Ruth in the future. There is enough evidence that God somehow steered these events in order to bring hope into this world. And that leads us to the other side of that coin or picture, that is the pleasantness. So from bitterness, we need to move to pleasantness. And that is God's provision. In verse 6, it clearly says God changed the fortunes of Judah. So rain started coming, and there is again growth in the land. And again, people have hope because God came through for them. And once again, there is food on the tables. And obviously, the famine was over, and the news reached Naomi. It should have been a glimmer of hope to Naomi, but she's not able, as I said, she's not at the time able to see it. Just as when a person or a spouse dies on that day, you don't tell them about how happy they should be. You can't, because at the moment, the dark clouds are just surrounding them in every single way. And then the fact that Naomi could return to Judah, to Bethlehem, where she had property. She had the opportunity to go back to her land and to her property. And in chapter 4, verse 3, there's reference to a piece of land that she owned, or that Elimelech owned, and now it's hers. She's now able to go back to a familiar environment, to old friends and connections, to people who still recognized her. Is this Naomi? So it's her culture, it's her religion, it's her God. And people around her are not worshiping Chemos or other gods. They're worshiping Yahweh, the God of Israel. And so she's able to go back. It's a glimmer of light. And yet Naomi is not able to see it yet. And then there is family. Now, despite the fact that Elimelech died and her two sons died, The Lord gave her two wonderful daughters-in-law, Moabites or not. They were wonderful people, and both of them insisted on going back with her. They wanted to go back with her. Orpah eventually became convinced, and she turned around. But Ruth held on. Ruth was family, and she became family. She was not blood related to Naomi, but she became family, and she became like Naomi's own daughter. And so God provided this wonderful light, bright light of Ruth to Naomi to give to her, where Ruth was able to say, I will go with you, and I will adopt everything that you are, where you live, where you die, where you are buried, your God, your people, your family, it's mine. Ruth made that total commitment, and yet at the moment, it seems like Naomi is not really able to absorb all of that. She just gave up and said, okay, well, let's go. And they traveled back to Bethlehem. As it turned out in the story, Ruth is really that amazing gift from God to Naomi. And then the other thing that Naomi is not seeing yet, that really should make her change from bitter to pleasant, is that she became a missionary without even knowing it. Naomi doesn't see it, but she made a convert. Ruth became a worshiper of God, the God of Israel. She turned her back on her own gods and her own history and her own culture, and she turned to the God of Israel. And she says so to Naomi, your God will be my God. And so she turned, she became a convert. And Naomi is the one who led her to that, Naomi and her family. And I don't know if Naomi ever explained to her anything or shared the gospel with her, as we would say. But I do believe that Naomi's behavior, her life, her lifestyle, her impact, her influence changed Ruth to say, I want to be who you are. I want to be where you are. I want to worship your God. And this is what Naomi did. This is what Ruth said. And this is what Naomi did. She became a missionary without even knowing it, a witness to God. And then there are new opportunities. Verse 22 says that they arrived in Bethlehem. It's the beginning of the barley harvest. And so very obviously, physically, the drought, the famine has changed into plenty. There's a harvest. It's a time of joy. It's a time of bringing in the food. It's a time of rejoicing in the whole land because God is blessing us. Naomi doesn't even see the harvest. She only sees her own bitterness, and she only sees what she has lost. And yet God has given her this wonderful bit of silver lining to remind her that He is ultimately in control. Moving from Mara to Naomi. Naomi said to the women, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. But I believe we need to change that around. We need to say to people, don't call me Mara, call me Naomi. Don't call me bitter, call me pleasant. Why? And how? How do we do that? Life may be bitter for you, life may be bitter for me, and we don't even know what 2026 is going to hold for us. And as we look at the world and world events, anything can blow up any time. It seems like we're living on the edge at the moment as far as that is concerned, with all the wars and the conflicts going on around us. So here are some guidelines that I want to highlight for us today. And the first is that we need to learn to deal with crisis situations. A crisis is a crisis. You cannot change that. Don't tell people when they lose a spouse or when they have cancer or whatever, you know what, every dark cloud has a silver lining. Please don't say that to people. Just let them be. Let them experience the crisis, because for them it is a crisis. And then for us too, we need to learn to acknowledge that. I am in a crisis. There's no need to deny it. When I'm sick, I'm sick. No need to say, I'm not sick, I'm not sick. If you're sick, you're sick. If you're in an accident, you're in an accident. If you lose someone, if you lose something, you've lost it. Acknowledge that. And then learn in and despite of that to wait on the Lord and to look for where God may be involved in all of this and how God can lead you and guide you. The second thing is commit to endure. We must be careful not to allow crisis situations to undermine our faith in God. And Naomi allowed that. I believe she came right later on. But here it was all about God. God has left me. God has not come through for me. And so somehow Naomi was on the verge of just leaving it all and saying, God doesn't like me, He doesn't love me, He's not for me, etc., etc. And we can very easily fall into that trap. We can almost do a Naomi thing here. And I believe that just commit to endure, saying, Lord, I want to serve you. I want to serve you faithfully. I want to serve you despite everything that may go against me. And when things are against me and when there is a crisis, I'm not denying that. But I cannot also deny God. God somehow is involved. Somehow God is there, even if I don't see it or experience it immediately. And then strengthen your belief in God. The story of Ruth clearly shows us that God never, ever loses control. And this will come clearly through in the next few chapters, very clearly. Somehow God is there, manipulating, steering, guiding, and ultimately bringing salvation. And we'll see that very clearly. So strengthen your belief in God and don't lose hope. We can easily allow circumstances to change our attitude from Naomi to Mara, from pleasantness to bitterness. But then we lose sight of who God is and what God can do. We need to continue to believe in God. Believe in God. Don't lose hope. The disciples, probably on that Saturday after Jesus was crucified, I think they probably lost hope. I think they thought, this is it. We thought Jesus is the Messiah. We thought He will come through for us, and now He's dead. He's buried. He's in a grave somewhere. But their bitterness changed into Naomi, changed into pleasantness on the Sunday morning when Jesus rose from the dead. And so we just need to focus on that. Somehow, sometime, it may be weeks, days, months, years even, but somehow God will come through for us. And then look for opportunities to be on mission. There's always an opportunity. Naomi, despite all her bitterness and bitter experiences, somehow had an impact on Ruth, to the point where Ruth wanted to convert to the God of Israel. We need to look for those opportunities. And that is the question, how am I behaving when there is a crisis situation? How do my children experience me when I'm in trouble? How do my neighbors perceive what's going on in my life? And how will other people, colleagues and others, experience me and my faith in God when there is a crisis, when things turn bitter in my life? And in behaving in a Christian way, in a God-like manner, I believe we can impact and influence other people. And when they ask, we can tell them it's only because of God. It's not because of anything that I have done. Let's pray. Oh, Father, we thank you so much for the story of Ruth. And we thank you that somehow we know that you are in control. Remind us about that. Help us, Lord, to hold on to our faith. Help us to continue to serve you every single day. And we thank you that you are faithful, that you will never ever change, you will never ever leave us, nor will you forsake us. And thank you for that, Lord. And so remind us about that and strengthen our faith today. In Jesus' name, amen.